Do you think setbacks are inevitable while dating?
Yeah, probably. But it's all how you process them that matters. Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Krafchick.
We're active daters turned dating sociologists.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to the DATEABLE podcast.
Before we get into this episode, a quick word from our sponsors that make it possible.
My word for this year has been harmony, and how serendipitous that Equilibria, a woman-owned wellness brand, focuses on bringing your mind and body back into harmony. Equilibria offers science-backed products that have helped over 200,000 women feel better. My go-to product is a daily Nutri-Greens, which contains an immune antioxidant and detox blend, along with prebiotics, probiotics, and over 35 fruits and veggies. They support digestion, boost the immune system, boost mood and energy levels, and helps detoxify the body. Admittedly, I'm not the best at reaching my recommended quota of veggies every day, but the daily Nutri-Greens makes it so much easier to reach that goal. Plus, it tastes great, and I feel an immediate energy boost after. This is my travel hack of the year, which is taking daily Nutri-Greens on the road with me so I can get my daily dose of greens even if I'm not home. Now, for our Dateable listeners only, head to myeq.com and use the code DATEABLE for 15% off Equilibria's daily Nutri-Greens and much more. That's myeq.com and use the code DATEABLE at checkout for 15% off site-wide today. Is anyone else struggling with what to wear these days? I feel like styles change faster than dating trends, and I certainly don't want to be buying new clothes all the time just to keep up. So enter Armoire. Armoire allows you to rent high-quality designer clothing for every occasion. And when I signed up, I took a style quiz, and based on my preferences, they offer suggestions that would best match my lifestyle. The more I rent, the more on point the suggestions get. I recently rented this gorgeous Tanya Taylor silk dress for date night and got so many compliments. I wouldn't normally have chosen this style, but with Armoire, you can take chances because if you don't like it, you just swap it out. Right now, our listeners can give Armoire a try and get up to 50% off their first month. That's up to $125 off. Just visit armoire.style/dateable. That is armoire.style, spelled ARMOIRE.style/DATEABLE to get up to 50% off your first month and never worry about what to wear again. Try Armoire today. And if you forget the link, just head to our Instagram and find it under special offers. Hello, friends.
Welcome back to Dateable.
How are you all doing? Everybody doing okay?
Pretty good, I think.
Everybody
I'm
happy?
speaking on behalf of our listeners.
Are you their spokesperson now? Our spokesperson for all of our Dateable listeners is now Julie Krafchick.
I'm bringing positive energy to our listeners is what I'm doing.
I've been trying to, when someone asks me how I'm doing, I've been trying to be more descriptive with my answer.
That's so good. Yeah.
Right? Because we always just say, oh, I've been good, I've been fine. But now I've been giving specific examples. I'm sure some friends are like, just shut up. Like, I don't need to know.
I actually like that a lot. I remember actually in one of the sessions that we were in at South by Southwest, I think it was the Jay Shetty one. Remember he was saying how people want closer emotional bonds, but then the language that they use does not enable that because you're like, how are you doing? Good. Okay. What do we do with that?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then you just go, okay, I'm fine. And they're like, okay, all right. That's about as deep as we're going to get today. So yeah, there's something to be said about just being more descriptive with how you truly feel. And I'm trying my best to at least be that way with myself too.
So how are you feeling then, Yue?
I'm feeling optimistic due to the weather.
Okay.
Because I love the sun. But also feeling anxiety because I always feel anxiety during seasonal changes.
Interesting. Interesting. So something else I've been trying to do lately while we're talking about habit formation, and I actually got inspired to do this when we were making our meeting in real life masterclass, actually. I don't think I told you this. And I'm clearly not trying to meet new people because I'm in a happy relationship. But I did realize that I really thrive on just meeting new people in general, like even in a platonic sense. And it makes me really happy. Like, okay, example, I would go to this coffee place all the time. I still go there every day. And there was this one girl that just came up to me one day and was just like, oh, I noticed you come here a lot. And she wasn't like hitting on me. It wasn't like that. It was very platonic and nice and just,
you never know.
It was nice to be acknowledged. I saw she actually talked to like a lot of people there. Like that was like her MO. And she actually moved away, is why I don't see her there anymore. But then when I would go, it was always so nice to like be greeted by someone. So I'm trying this thing where I, make small talk if it's available to me. Like the other day at the same coffee place, I was in line and there was a girl that had a really cute dog. So I asked about the dog. Aww. And I'm also trying this thing where I like smile at people, which I know is such a foreign thing, but it makes me feel better. Like even if they don't respond and return the sentiment, one, I think it makes me feel more approachable, but also it gives me endorphins to just be smiling more.
I like that. Yeah. You don't have to meet people IRL for romantic reasons. I think this is a skill we can all hone in on. So I'm glad that this is something that you've been prioritizing, especially, I don't know about you, but whenever I get in a relationship, I get really lazy about meeting new people because I'm like comfortable or whatever. And like, oh, I'm with my partner. But then you get, this rush of dopamine when you do meet new people. And then you realize, oh, I do like people.
I agree. I think there's just something that's missing in today's world. And I think this 100% trickles to dating, which is why people find dating so challenging, is this like lack of connection everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you're walking around with your AirPods in, not talking to anyone, looking at the ground, which is all things I'm guilty of, it just doesn't open up anything. And like, how much better is your day just to like engage even with like people that work at a restaurant or like things like that are just in your like go-tos.
I know. That's so true. It makes me a little bit sad. And we will get to the topic of this episode very soon.
Setbacks.
But this is a good tangent to go off on. I recently got tickets to go see Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with Jimmy Kimmel. It's random. I got tickets on my own. It's in my neighborhood. It's walkable. I was like, okay, I'm just going to go. It's a 25th anniversary show. It's celebrity edition. So I was like, why not? I'm going to go. And I sat there by myself and there were everybody in my row. They came by themselves and nobody was talking to each other at this most exciting show. I mean, it was like John Mulaney, Nick Kroll, Rosie O'Donnell. Like there were some awesome celebrities there. And it's a trivia-based show. So you want to talk about the questions, right? So I turned to the girl next to me to say something to her, and she legitimately just ignored me and went on her phone.
What?
This is during a break. Yeah, I was like, is it me or is it just kind of cold in here? And she just ignored me. She looked at me, she ignored me, and she went on her phone. And I was like, okay, she's not talking to me. So I turned to the girl to the right of me and I was like, oh, have you been to one of these before? And she's like, yeah, all the time. And then turned away, fucking turned her head away from me. And I was like, is nobody wanting to socialize or connect anymore? We are at like the most socially inducing show right now. This environment wants us to engage with each other, yet everybody was on their phone during the break, not talking to each other. I was so depressed afterwards.
This is the setback of our generation. It truly is.
I should tie it back.
I really think though, like we'll finish up this tangent, but like I think of this guest we had, Inez. She's in her 70s. We did this whole episode about like this BFF pair that one was in their 70s and one was in their 30s and how dating was different for both of them, yet similar. And one of the things I admire about her, I still see her from time to time. She's just so friendly and joyful. And I remember her just being like, yeah, of course I'll talk to someone on the bus because like it brightens their day. It brightens my day. And there is this lost art of our generation that no one does that anymore. It's phones. But good for you for trying. And that says nothing about you. I don't think this should diminish your quest to be friendly. I think it's really great.
I know. I was like, Jimmy Kimmel, will you talk to me? Like nobody else wants to talk to me. And I sat right behind him. He was an arm's length away from me. So I guess I could have just been like, yo, Kimmel, want to talk? Nobody wants to socialize.
You missed your chance. There you go.
I missed my chance, damn it. But it does tie back to our topic, which is all about setbacks, because I think the reason why such a hard time with setbacks is that we don't always have the support system after, so that you feel like you have to go through everything alone. It's just you and the internet trying to get through all of the heartbreak or the healing that you need to do. And then it's like, how can you feel supported if you don't have a support system in place?
Yeah. So this whole story of how this episode came to be is actually kind of interesting. I would say in a setback, it's so meta, but I actually went home because my aunt had passed from cancer back in February of last year or this year, I guess. Oh my God, it feels like so many months has gone by.
Yes,
it was only like 4 months ago. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, I went back home because my aunt passed of cancer. And in the Jewish tradition, you have this thing called sitting Shiva, where you actually, it's kind of an odd thing because it's like remembering the person and recognizing and acknowledging, but it's meant to actually be a little joyous. Like people are just like eating food, and it's not like, I wouldn't say it's like a full on party. I don't mean it like that, but it's social. You're not like sitting around like, reliving every last memory of the person that just passed. So anyways, one of the people that was at the Shiva was my cousin's friend. And I started talking to her, and it turned out we went to the same college and things. I think she actually was like a dancer in another big dating podcast, Girls Gotta Eat. She was like a dancer in one of their shows. What? She was like a cheerleader before. So anyways, there were a lot of like connections. She found the podcast really interesting, and she was like, you got to talk to my cousin. She just wrote a book about setbacks. And
so this is your cousin's friend's cousin.
Yes. There's a lot of connection here. Immediately when she said setbacks, because her cousin's book, Amy Shoenthal, who's our guest today, it's more in the professional sense. Like, I mean, it's touching on everything. I don't want to say it's not. Like, she talks about divorce and breakups and relationships. It's more just like all encompassing is probably the better way to say it. Just setbacks at a large. But immediately when she talked about it, I was like, oh, we need to have her because setbacks are such a big thing in dating. And it's not really something that we talk about a lot, but it happens all the time. And that's what really makes it hard to move forward.
Which sparked the question, are setbacks inevitable in dating and relationships and in love in general?
I think so. I think it's part of the process, ultimately. I don't know if I know anyone that hasn't had any setback. Of course, they all range in size and how you deal with them and how you process it. But I do think setbacks are inevitable.
Damn, if you've never had a setback in your dating life, please let us know. Please email us, call us, DM us, whatever, telegram us right now. We must find you. I want to speak to you.
And then what a setback means, I think this episode will definitely help us unpack the definition a little more. But there's quite the range.
Yeah, because sometimes we think of setbacks as a pause in our lives or a step back. But in this conversation with Amy, what you as a listener will take away from this episode is understanding, well, one, what a setback is, and then understanding the process cycle of what happens after. Like, what is the best way to process a setback?
And then how to eventually rise above it and not ruminate. We talk about our own experiences in depth here, but I think you obviously clearly had the recent setback of your ex and all the cheating and all the stuff that went down and blowing up the life that you two were planning together. And I also talk about a relationship too, where I thought it was the one and it wasn't, and how managing those setbacks and then using kind of the tools that Amy shared too can really make or break how you move forward ultimately.
Yes. And you will feel inspired because it shows you that now you have the tools to handle any setback you have. And I recently met up with a friend of mine, Patricia. I'm just going to give her a shout out. She lives in New York, but she came to Laguna Beach because she had a year of setbacks last year. And she was like, you know what? I need to take control of my life and my own health, both physically and mentally. So she came to Laguna Beach and gave herself this wonderful vacation before she went on another vacation to Greece. I'm like, yes, girl, you do your thing. Yes. But she didn't even know that she went through the entire like setback cycle, from accepting to like exploring. You'll hear all about it. But part of her healing during the setback cycle, this processing is getting out and meeting people IRL. She feels so much joy and energy from it that she took herself on a one-day date in New York, the city that she was born and raised in. She's never done this in her entire life. Then one day she's like, you know what? I'm inspired. I'm going to go take myself on a date. She took herself out for a walk and shopping and drinking and for a nice meal at a restaurant that normally she wouldn't be able to get a seat at. She just walked in and she met so many awesome strangers along the way that it was no longer about finding a partner. She is single. She wasn't looking for something romantic. She was just completely energized by the experience, which speaks volumes to our Meeting People IRL masterclass, because people who have gone through the entire class have said they just feel inspired to meet people. It's not even just meeting your person, just like feeding off that energy. And it is a healing energy in itself.
Well, we'll get into it in this episode, but there's like this whole discover phase, and it sounds like that's what she was in.
Yeah, that's my favorite phase.
Yeah, but it's so important because I really believe that perseverance is the number one quality that you need to be good at dating. And I know like people will always like ask like, how'd you meet your partner? And of course like Hinge is the short term, but I think the real thing is perseverance because you just keep getting up and getting past the setbacks. And that's not saying that setbacks aren't difficult. Of course, huge breakups or any setback that sets you back is hard. But ultimately, I think you can at least, I'll speak for myself. I think the ones that I've gone through, you can see how you were meant to have that experience and how it's actually helping you in the long haul.
Yeah. And you'll probably reframe it as a moment in time.
Yeah.
As a learning moment or something instead of a setback once you're out of it.
Well, excited to dive in deeper with Amy because there's so much to unpack. But quick announcements before we do. As Yue noted, we have our Meeting People IRL Masterclass, or whatever we're calling it now, still TBD, is open throughout all of summer. And you can go to dateablepodcast.com/programs, check that out, see what else we have in store, see what else is on the website. Have fun there at Dateable Podcast, Instagram, and YouTube. TikTok, we're everywhere. So come find us on your platform of choice. And last but not least, leave us a rating and review. Help us get to that 1K and 500 on Spotify. We're almost there, so help us out.
Please, 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 please.
Okay, well, before we get into it, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors.
Do you ever wish there was a way to warn people about your ex, or alert others about a creepy date, or find out if your significant other is seeing someone else, or just curious to know what's happening in your local dating scene? I can't see you, but I feel you all nodding your heads, so you'll appreciate that Date Detective makes it all possible. Date Detective is a brand new app that just launched. They're on a mission to create a safer dating community through the power of information. The app lets you review your dates and share your experiences while maintaining your privacy. So, how it works is that you post information you like to share about your date, including their name, phone number, and/or social media accounts. Their personal details stay private, but your review about them is public. When someone else searches for that person's name, phone number, or social media username, they can see the reviews about them. Now, Date Detective also has community features like groups where you can connect with others or make your own private space with you and your friends. Investigate your next date on Date Detective. Download the app through date-detective.app. Summer is basically here, and your wardrobe needs an upgrade, right? Instead of a flimsy fast fashion haul, which I used to be guilty of, now spend your money wisely on high-quality essentials that will last beyond the season. Quince is my spot for quiet luxury without paying luxury prices. They offer a range of must-have items like 100% European linen under $50, 14-karat gold jewelry from $30, and my most favorite recent purchase was a pair of comfy, high-quality biker shorts that cost about half of what I would normally pay. I know you're wondering how they do it. Quince partners directly with top factories to cut out the cost of the middleman and pass the savings on to you. And they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium eco-friendly fabrics and finishes. So I can feel good about getting high-quality items that last longer. Upgrade your closet this summer with Quince. Right now, go to quince.com/dateable to get free shipping and 365-day returns on your next order. That's QUINCE.com/DATEABLE for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable.
Spring, a time for new beginnings. But you know what adds an extra spring to my step? Our partners at Via Hemp. Whether you want to get better sleep, ease anxiety, enhance your mood, or just get high, they have something for you, including their best-selling High Love Gummy, which will awaken your senses, increase blood flow, and intensify any sexual experience. A couple of weeks ago, I shared some of my gummies with my cleaner, Lou, who we've also had as a guest on the podcast. Shout out to Lou. The first thing he said to me when he came over today was if he could have more because they were that damn good. Personally, I've been liking their 0 THC products. So whether you're a 2 milligram or a 50 milligram user, Via has something for you. So head to viahemp.com and use the code DATEABLE to receive 15% off and one free sample of their award-winning gummies. 21 plus. That's VIIA hemp.com and use the code DATEABLE at checkout. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Take your passion and pleasure to a whole new level with High Love from Via Hemp. Okay, let's hear it from Amy all about setbacks.
Setbacks. Very familiar for many of us, especially when it comes to love. And the bigger question we have is, can setbacks in dating and relationships actually be a good thing? And today we have an expert on setbacks. Her name is Amy Shoenthal. She's the author of the book Setback Cycle that just came out in March. Thanks for joining us on talking about this very important topic.
Thank you.
So who is Amy? She is 40, lives in New York, originally from Long Island, and she is married. And as someone who wrote an entire book about setbacks, how would you define what a setback is?
So I came upon the definition of a setback after I was trying to understand how all of these business leaders and founders came to their best ideas after undergoing something. Every time I interviewed someone, the story seemed to go through some similar framework, and I wanted to understand what it was. And when I came upon the definition of a setback, it is a reversal or check in progress. And I was like, that's it. Everyone is working on a path, moving towards a goal, moving forward in some way. And then bam, they are bumped backwards. And so that can be true of business, career, dating, relationships, marriage, divorce. And it almost always seemed like when they got bumped backwards, what they did in the aftermath of a setback is what led them to something that ended up being even greater than the original path they were on. That's basically why I wrote the book.
Interesting. So obviously dating and relationships and love is the lens of this podcast. And I can think of a few setbacks, like when you think you're on the path to marriage or something, and then you suddenly get broken up with. That's a setback. Are there any other ways that you can think of setbacks in dating and relationships that might not be the obvious ones?
I feel like every time I talk to someone about the type of setback that you unconsciously float into, because not all setbacks are obvious, right? An ending of a relationship, a divorce. Yeah, those are obvious because you were on a path moving in your relationship in a way that you were happy about, or at least in a forward trajectory. And then you're bumped backwards because the relationship ends or doesn't go in the direction you want. But how many people do you know who just sort of stay in relationships for too long? Even when they see the signs, right? A setback is a reversal in progress. That reversal doesn't always necessarily mean it's the breakup. it could mean it's the red flag moment, If you've gone on 3-4 dates with someone and then you just start to see their mood changing, their vibe changing, the way they treat you, the way they treat the wait staff at a restaurant. You start to see certain signs and maybe you're not thrilled with it, but you're like, well, we've been on 3 or 4 dates. The chemistry is good. I don't want to go start over. And it just seems easier to continue than to restart. Like that to me is more of a setback than anything else. And what happens to these relationships? They inevitably do end. And then you're further along than you necessarily needed to be had you not ignored the signs. That's a big part of phase 1 of the setback cycle, acknowledging the discomfort and not ignoring the signs.
So setbacks can be very obvious or they're not so obvious, like you were just mentioning. How do we know the difference between a setback than from just a bump in the road that we just need to work through?
That is so personal. That is so dependent on the individual circumstances. I have a checklist in the book called the alarm clock checklist, and it's intended to wake you up if you think you might be like sleepwalking or unconsciously drifting along into a setback. And it has quite a few questions. It's a checklist. You have to kind of go through the list. It's something that will alert you to the fact that you might be in a setback, or it's a really good reminder of how energized you are by your relationship. So 2 of the questions I ask in this exercise are, what are you energized by and what are you disengaged with? And if you ask yourself those 2 questions every day for a month, and then you map certain activities to the days when you had certain answers, all of a sudden you might start to pick up connections and patterns. And it might be just the thing you need to evaluate the situation you're in. It's almost like you're doing like a performance review and like a check-in. Like every month and saying like, oh, I didn't like the way this dinner when they met my family went and I'm very disengaged right now. But then like you're really energized if you're one-on-one. That could start to unlock some patterns. You have to decide if these are deal breakers, if this is a setback, or if it's just an obstacle that you can work through. It's so personal. I can't define that for you. You have to, really kind of figure that out for yourself.
Okay, I'm just thinking about like in dating, a lot of people, they want to have the relationship. They want to find the quote unquote, the one, the person, all of that. Let's say you've just been on one too many bad dates and you're just like, oh, another date that's not getting me there. Is that a setback or is that just like part of the course of getting there?
Again, it's so personal, but I would say that's probably just part of the course of getting there because going on one more bad date doesn't set you backwards. It just sort of like eliminates one more option for partnership.
Got it.
Like you're moving forward and then you're bumped backwards. That's a setback. I don't think going on yet another date, like every date is an opportunity to find that partnership that you're looking for and testing out your options as much as possible. That's only going to propel you forward. It might exhaust you.
Right.
But it's not a setback. Like it's something else. It's annoying, but it's not technically a setback.
Got it.
And then in all of the subjects you've interviewed, setbacks, it is the crux of the story. And we see it in artists as well. I mean, when was the last time Adele wrote a song not after a setback, right? I think setbacks is the fodder for growth. But why is this so hard for us to still accept setbacks? Why is this still so challenging?
So when you experience a setback, it results in a dopamine dip in your brain. We think of dopamine dips as a bad thing. They are. They don't feel good. But dopamine is a plasticity inducer, which means that is what contributes to your brain's mental flexibility and your ability to build resilience. And so if you pay attention to what you learn in those dopamine dips and you don't ignore the clues, you will learn so much from that experience and you will get a sense of what you will put up with and what you won't. And I think that's the biggest thing. But look, as a society, we have been conditioned to avoid discomfort.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for us to have the instinct to just ignore the discomfort and move on and sort of barge forward without taking the space and the time to learn. And I think in relationships, that's what causes a lot of people to continuously seek out partners that aren't a match for them because they just are going and doing the same thing they have always done, even if that relationship or partnership didn't work out, even if that date didn't go well, because they're not learning. They're not being introspective. They're not embracing the discomfort. And it's understandable. That's the thing. It's all very understandable because this is how we've been conditioned. But The second phase of the setback cycle is embrace. And if you embrace the moment you're in, not only to say like, wow, I'm disappointed that that didn't work out, but like, what else did it bring up? Like, where else have you felt that rejection? What part of the rejection impacted you so much? Like, did you feel like they didn't respect you? Do you feel like they didn't listen to you? Do you feel like they, sort of threatened or questioned your intelligence or your credibility or something like that? Like, what was it and where have you felt that before? Why is it impacting you so much? And what can you learn? And what can you do differently next time?
I think for me, at least, I think setbacks are challenging because they're a disruption to a plan. At least I like to feel like I'm in control of where things are going. And then when, the setback comes, like, especially when it's coming from another person, not wanting to maybe go on the same path as me, etc., it's really hard. From your experience, like, is that kind of the crux of like why setbacks are so challenging? Or are there other things they bring up for people in addition?
It's both and. That is certainly one of the reasons setbacks are so challenging. The stress response has 3 responses, not 2. So you think of the stress response and it's fight or flight. But there's a third option. You can freeze because you're sort of like, wait, like what just happened? Why am I in this moment? How do I get out of it? What do I do next? And you freeze. So I have an exercise in the book called Thaw Yourself Out because
I love that.
All I do really for readers is just like ask very simple, gently guiding questions so that you can understand what moment you're in, what it's bringing up for you, and what information you can use to move forward. And I think the third phase of the setback cycle is explore. And this is when you get to play and test out new things and explore the intersection of like your passion with your strength. But what I love about the explore phase is that you get to play, but you don't have to commit yet. And I think that's really relevant for dating because dating it can be exhausting, and I get it because you're maybe looking for a long-term life partner and you're going continuously on first dates and it's just so draining of your energy. But dating is also a moment for exploration and learning about yourself and figuring out what you like, what you don't like, what's going to light you up, what's going to get you excited. Like you have this ability to go out and find out what you want in a partner and what you don't want. So it's exhausting. I get it. But it's also an exploration into yourself. You have to look at this partner. I feel like a lot of times after a date, we'll evaluate a partner for who they are. But we don't necessarily take that experience and think, okay, this is how the partner made me feel. This is how the person on the date made me feel. This is what they, revealed about me. And do I want more of that? And again, you don't have to commit. You can go on a second date without committing. Like you're just sort of asking questions and evaluating. And again, like you're in the exploration phase. I think dating is just like a perpetual explore phase, which you have to just reframe your mindset around it. And I know that this is so much easier to say than actually to do. But if you can reframe your mindset of like, I'm still learning and I haven't figured out what I want yet, and I haven't figured out who I want to be with yet, there are still all these possibilities ahead of you. And that's kind of nice.
Well, I have to commend Yue. Maybe you don't know this backstory, but Yue had a major setback of, being with a partner for 5 years, but she basically was blindsided by a partner's infidelity. And it was a setback, but I think where you really thrive was this explore stage, because I think it's so easy to just be like, I'm not going to trust people again, or I don't want to date again. But I felt like you really like took it. It was like, I'm going to learn what works for me in this phase and try to like use that setback to actually get more clarity. Are there other ways like Amy that you would say that like setbacks could actually propel you forward outside of what you were saying before of just like being maybe ahead because you're in exploration?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways setbacks propel you forward. Here's the thing. When you're on a path going in a certain direction, you're not exploring possibilities outside of that path. Generally, you could be on a path. I don't know if this is like great for dating, but like you could be on a path while still exploring possibilities. Like that maybe is more of like a business analogy than a dating analogy, unless everyone's cool with the situation of like maybe being with one person and exploring others. I mean, I know people who were in open relationships and actually really worked out for them because no one felt like they were confined to their partnership. And then they had all their exploration. And many years later, it ended in marriage and family creation. So there are ways to explore, or, there's also the mentality of my romantic partner does not need to be everything to me. I get this from that person, and I get this from my friends, and I get this from my colleagues, and I get this from my siblings. And again, it's a lot about mindset and what you're looking for. I do know a lot of people who think that once they are no longer single and they're in a happy relationship, that person will be everything to them. Their best friend, their business coach, their confidant, their, sexual partner, their strategist. And it's like, they could probably be some of those things, but you don't need to rely on your partner for every single thing. You should have more than one confidant.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually was just going through your 4 phases, applying it to my situation. And I thought about the pivotal moments that set off each phase. I definitely first established that this is a setback. I kept saying, this is what's happening. This is my story, and this is how it's going.
Yeah.
And then I embraced it by saying, well, this is my chance to take over the narrative and turn myself into the hero in the story. I explored, I went on my solo trip, and I certainly emerged out of that solo trip thinking, I wish the best for him. I wish the best for everyone. If everyone found their true happiness and true love, the world would be a much better place. Now, I will say though, it was in between establish and embrace where I had the most difficult time making that transition. Sure, I can accept this is what's happening to me, but how do I embrace it? And I can also see people who may be going through a setback right now. That's probably a really difficult transition to say, this is what's happening to me and I welcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice or methods to get people to make that transition? Because I had to find that on my own. And I have to say, there were some dark days for me to go through. And maybe that is the process.
First of all, the embrace phase is by no means happily welcoming your awful feelings about what bad thing just happened to you that is classified as a setback. We're not happily welcoming it. This is a book about setbacks, but it doesn't glorify pain or romanticize suffering in any way. It just acknowledges that setbacks are inevitable experiences, and here's how you can work through them. But your point about going from establish to embrace, because yes, you've established you're in a setback. In your case, it's a very obvious one. Need any alarm clock checklist? Your setback was clearly
the
established.
alarms went off. Yeah.
The alarm went off.
The checklist was in my face.
Yeah, I don't think you needed that tool. But I think that so many people struggle with, okay, I established I'm in a setback, but I'm actually not really ready to sit down and deal with the discomfort and learn and be introspective. You need a break between establish and embrace, and that is fine. If you are exhausted and you just need to sit on the couch and watch Netflix and cry, you do that. You have to do what is healthy and what suits you in this moment. I am not trying to fast forward your setback or tell you it's time to move forward in any way if you are not ready to move forward. When you are ready to embrace it, I have all the tools you need to go through that. And you can definitely read it, read the activities, and decide if you're ready to do them yet. But don't do anything until you're ready. You have to give yourself the rest and give yourself the space and recognize any barriers you might be facing. Wait before you barge forward. And when you're ready, pick up the worksheet at the end of the book and peek at what people did during their embrace phase, right? If you're not ready to go through it yourself, just skip through and read the stories of people who went through setbacks, because at least you'll know you're not alone. If you're not ready to work through the cycle yet, that's fine. Don't do it until you're ready, but maybe talk to people and read stories of people who have been through similar experiences.
It's a really good point. Having the tools, it's important. I think just knowing you have the tools is already great to know. I've been trying to hang up this painting on my wall for a long time. I have all the tools.
Yeah.
I have everything I need. I'm just not ready. I'm just not in the headspace. But I know I'm in good hands when I'm ready.
Yeah.
And that's probably what it feels like.
That's fine.
I'll be in good hands when I'm ready.
You have the tools, and now you have to decide what to build. And what you decide and when you decide to take action is totally up to you.
I'm not trying to compare setbacks, but I'm going to, just for this example's sake. But I feel like UA was able to move through yours pretty quickly relative to what happened. Like, I think within like, I don't know, a couple months, you were like feeling like, I mean, obviously there was, I'm sure, going on for you in the background, but from outside perspective, it looks like you were moving forward in life and coming to terms and really going after like a new life. I feel like when I had a partner, this was years ago, break up with me unexpectedly, like I held on for a very long time that like we were still going to get back together. I wasn't ready to embrace like at all. And like, I know there's no like time that like that can happen, but I guess like from your perspective, like from, you know, going through this cycle, like what is kind of the range of how that can fall for different people?
You're not going to like this answer because some people, it takes like decades to work through the setback cycle, but that really happens more so to the people who are floating unconsciously into setbacks and not establishing it.
Yeah.
Usually that's what takes a long time. Once your setback is established, again, in the more obvious versions or in the more subtle versions, then, I mean, look, it could still take a year, 2 years, something like that to work through the cycle. But if you saw this moment as a setback and you wanted to sort of dwell on it for a minute before you move forward, that's fine. But I will caution, do not get stuck in rumination or obsession because it's a slippery slope for me to go advise you or advise your listeners to, hey, take the space you need before you move forward. Like that's all great, but don't take too long. So there's a difference between evaluating why this impacted you so much and learning from whatever happened, whether it was a mistake of your own, whether it was the actions of others, whether it was a cultural or societal issue that impacted you. That's all fine. Evaluate and get the information you need, but don't obsess over it because that's when it starts to get tricky.
I think that was probably a huge difference of the two is one, I didn't acknowledge it was a setback. I was just like, oh, this is, you know, part of my love story. It wasn't like part of like my story of building myself and what's going to come. Years later, though, I can absolutely acknowledge that that setback was one of the best things for me. Like, first of all, like propelled me to do this podcast and, you know, to just be a different person and much more insightful and in touch with what's going on. And I don't think I would have sought out therapy and done all the things if this setback didn't happen. Yeah. Like, how can people start to see that? Like, I know it's hard if you're in the thick of it, but like, how can you start to see that like setbacks actually are not only inevitable, but actually a really good thing if you let it be that?
I don't know that they're always a good thing, but they can lead you to somewhere good for sure. For sure.
That's a good distinction.
Well, because they're painful and pain is not good in the moment. But yes, it can be a catalyst for change and for growth and for forward momentum. You know, what I think you're saying is people need a little guidance, whatever it is, you know, to kind of work themselves out of that little pit of despair and that moment of just absolute self-doubt. But also, like your setback, everything is always so much clearer with the advantage of hindsight. So much clearer, you know, and I'm sure so many people, when they look back at a breakup and they look where maybe that person ended up, they think, oh my God, thank God I didn't end up with them.
Right.
But you can't get that clarity in the immediate aftermath of your breakup, of your setback, of you finding out about infidelity, of you finding out that this isn't going in the direction you thought it was going to be. That's the painful part. You can start to ask yourself certain questions that will eventually get you to that clarity, but you're not going to get it immediately. And so when you ask, like, what do people need to know in those really treacherous moments of self-doubt? So after listening to this podcast, you will understand setbacks so much more clearly, and you will probably see some of your own life experiences as the setbacks that they were, as the defining moments that they were. And I think if you start to realize, well, I got through that, so I can get through this. When you start to sort of map the patterns between your current experience and something similar that you went through however long ago, you start to get a better understanding of your own inner strength. You start to build that confidence and you start to realize that, like, hey, there's actually a whole world of possibilities out there for me whenever I'm ready to, you know, get up and get off the couch and go do that exploration again, which I will be. And look, if you're getting stuck in a cycle of rumination and obsession and you're really struggling to move forward, give yourself a deadline.
Yeah.
I had like a friendship setback recently. When you become an author and you share your story very vulnerably and you see some level of success, not everyone wants to support you. And I had someone who I thought would support me and they didn't. And it was a surprise. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, like, wow, I did not expect this from this person. So when it's a surprise, it throws you off. To me, it was a friendship setback. Someone who I expected to be in my corner told me would not be. And I said, oh my God, this is really going to upset me. I gave myself a day. I said, today I will be as upset about this as I want. I can obsess over it. I can run through it in my brain, and I am allowed to just let it do all the things that it's going to do. Have the day. And I said, when you wake up tomorrow morning, this is my inner dialogue that I'm sharing with you. But I was like, when you wake up tomorrow morning, yeah, it's going to pop into your head. But like, that's when you kind of have to push it out of your head. And that worked because I gave it the space that it deserved because I knew it would impact me. But I didn't want it to like dominate every thought and every bit of self-consciousness. Like, why isn't this person supporting me? So I gave it a day and I was upset about it for a day. And of course it came and it's popping into my head a lot, but I'm way less upset about it than I was, like 2 weeks ago when it happened. It only pops in, here and there. And so that was me. That was this one specific instance, this one specific relationship setback. But yeah, even the setback expert has setbacks, relationship setbacks, and I have to decide how I'm going to work through each one of them because not all setbacks are the same.
I love that example though, because it's just like, it's not always like a track to some sort of outcome, but it's more like a rupture or like, oh, I wasn't expecting that response from someone. So it can be as like small or big, or it doesn't need to be ending, maybe is what I'm gathering. Like I'm thinking about like a setback that I had with my current partner is like, it ended up being resolved, but like I wanted to move in quicker than he did. And at first he had given me a timeline and then kind of like went back on that timeline a little. And that was definitely a setback because I was like, everything's moving forward and now it's not. And huge setback, but we were able to like get through it. And obviously it was a little later than the timeline I wanted, but it got there. Maybe that brings to emerge like the fourth part of your cycle, either like using that example or your friendship. Like, how do you come out of this setback cycle?
Well, what's interesting about your example, I'm going to answer in two parts because I want to talk about your example and then I'll talk about emerge.
Okay.
So the interesting thing about what you just shared is that you were absolutely on a path moving forward. You had negotiated a timeline and then that negotiation fell apart. So you had to renegotiate your timeline. So really you were more so in embrace while that was happening because like, why did that bother you? You don't have to answer, but like, why did that bother you so much that you had to renegotiate the timeline? Did it bring up prior rejection? Did it bring up any self-consciousness that like maybe this partner would never want to move in with me if he doesn't move in now? Because I've been there, you know what I mean? And like there's all this self-doubt that we always carry. There will be people and there will be circumstances that validate your self-doubt narrative. So that moment for you, I assume, brought up all of that self-consciousness that you always carry around relationships, probably because of prior failed relationships. And what you had to do in that moment was turn to your partner and renegotiate the terms of your partnership, really. I had to do this with my partner after I got laid off because we were equal contributors to our monthly expenses, and that's just like the way it had always been. Then all of a sudden I got laid off. I'm talking about a very logistical situation, but it brought up a lot of emotions and it brought up a lot of relationship renegotiation. Like, I need to get a haircut. Can I spend money on myself now that I don't make any money? Like, I was like, it was such a renegotiation of the terms that, we had just been chugging along. Like, we both contribute the same amount to our monthly expenses and then we spend whatever we want on ourselves. And like, that's just how it had always been without a lot of discussion. And then there needed to be a discussion because things changed. In relationships, you frequently have to renegotiate the terms because a lot of decisions are made based on assumptions. I think there's plenty of people who go into a relationship and say, well, we've been dating for 8 months, so I assume he should say I love you soon, or I assume we should move in together soon. But like, you can make all the assumptions you want. If you don't have the discussion with your partner, you're never going to be on the same page. And so I think that's a lot of maybe what happened in your circumstance. And so how do we get to the embrace phase? That's the second part of your question, which is, for a relationship, renegotiate the terms. Also, look, if you're comfortable, bring up what you're going through if you're in an embrace phase of the setback cycle. Hey, I understand that you're not ready to move in, but I want you to know what this brings up for me and how this is impacting me. Because chances are, guy just needs some time, and it's no reflection on you at all.
Right.
But you need to have that discussion, because if you carry it inside you, it's going to come out in ways that you don't want it to. And so it's like really, really hard to do. But if you can, or you can at least like dribble out your message in little bits, like, this is how this is making me feel. Just so you know, that's how you get to emerge, because you have the renegotiation, the candid discussion, and you explore what your new options are. Mm-hmm. You renegotiate, and then you get to emerge because you come to a new agreement.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners. Did you know that an estimated 5 billion plastic hand soap and cleaning bottles are thrown away each year? That is such a lose-lose situation for you and the planet. Blueland is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet with the same powerful clean you're used to. They offer refillable cleaning products with a beautiful, cohesive design that looks great on your counters. You'll never have to grab bulky cleaning supplies on your grocery run again. I seriously love all the products, from the cleaning sprays to hand soap, toilet bowl cleaner, and laundry tablets. The other day, my cleaner Lou, shout out as I know he listens, even commented on how good these products work. So professional house cleaner approved too. Blueland has a special offer for listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/dateable. You don't want to miss this. blueland.com/dateable for 15% off. That's blueland.com/dateable to get 15% off.
And maybe that is where I would love to focus a little bit more on, because I guess Julie's scenario was she was still in the embrace phase when her original question was about emerging out of this. So maybe there is a little bit of, I think you could be in embrace and think that you're emerging. Yeah. That could be the disconnect. And I'll give this scenario because I think she's probably also in this as well. She was broken up with, blindsided. They had already met each other's families, and he had a very definitive breakup with her, knowing that this door was no longer open. So she went through establish. I think she went through embrace. I think she went through explore. She emerged out of this, and it's, this is a dear friend of mine, and we've been talking about how she's been fine. And then all of a sudden, just a few months after, it's all coming back. All the feelings are coming back. I think it's triggered by a memory, something. Then my question is, do you think she fully went through the 4 phases? That's probably why maybe she hasn't gone through all the phases. That's why she's back where she is now.
I mean, there's a chance that is definitely what it sounds like, but not knowing this person and not knowing the details of the scenario, it's really hard to comment. Yeah. But it does sound like either she didn't fully go through embrace and she just wanted to fast forward, which again, all of us have the instinct to do because we've been conditioned to avoid discomfort. So we all want to fast forward. I did all this research, know that it's the wrong thing to do, still have the instinct to want to fast forward through all of my setbacks. So It is human nature. The other thing that could be going on, though, is something else happened that triggered the memory of the thing that she just went through. Yeah. It could have been like a rejection thing that happened maybe at work or with a friend. And now that's gone, and, she's having all kinds of feelings about it. I remember I went through a breakup. I had been with someone for 5 years, through college and then my early 20s. And I remember going through the breakup and thinking I'm so sad, but I'll be okay. And then maybe 2 months later, I didn't get a promotion at work that I thought I was going to get. And you guys, I almost had a full-blown panic attack because I was I already lost this. I can't now lose this. How can, no, this was the thing I was supposed to have because I don't have the relationship anymore. I was supposed to now I can be career woman, but now I didn't get this promotion. And I mean, it hit so much harder because I had just been through the other thing and the rejection and feeling like it was a setback. I remember I worked right near Central Park, and I remember just having that panicky feeling and having to run downstairs and go to the park and cry because I didn't want to cry at work. Yeah. And I remember how much that impacted me. And I think it was because I was, triggered by a lot of the same emotions I felt right after the breakup. because it was still fresh.
So does that trigger a whole new cycle of this new thing that just happened then?
I think that if you have just gone through a setback, and especially if you haven't fully processed it and you didn't go through like a proper embrace, like you're still raw. And of course it can make the next setback like a little tougher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's the, well, I've been through it before, I can go through it again. And that's all true. But if it happens like one after another, which is frequent, it can just be too much at once or too much too fast while the other setback is still fresh. And again, especially if you haven't properly processed it.
Oh, I do remember like I had a friend that this happened to her. It was like 3 people in 1 week like said they didn't want to see her again. And I was exactly saying the same thing. I'm like, if it was just one, it probably wouldn't have impacted you as much. But when things get compounded, it starts to feel like a pattern. Like this is happening to me. This is like my life story. Like how do you start to get out of that mindset of like, okay, it is another setback. It doesn't mean like this is my life and this is what's meant for me.
So there's a section in the book called identity versus behavior.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like apples to apples for what you're saying, but I think it's relevant. A lot of people make a mistake or go down a path that they shouldn't have, and it results in a setback. And they have such shame around this experience. And they just fall into this moment of not being able to really like forgive themselves for it. And they take something that happened and they want to make it their whole identity, whether it was a behavior, whether it was some unforeseen circumstance. And they say like, you know, kind of like I did with my, well, I'm not in a relationship, but I'm a career woman now. Like what? You could be both. You could be neither, whatever, you know, but I just like decided that that was my identity now. And so when that was taken away, it shattered me. And so too many people get caught up with this behavior versus identity issue. And it's just a reminder that like, you are not your behaviors. And like this woman was not the rejection that she got from those 3 different people that week. Like that is not her identity, but it probably felt like it was in that moment.
Right.
And so that's just something you have to pull back and remember, like, this is a crazy time. This is not who I am. This does not define me.
Right.
I mean, it's so hard when things happen one after another and you feel like maybe they're related. And what is relating all of them is you. You think you're
you always
common
think it's
denominator.
Your fault. You always think, I mean, that's
you,
the other thing. Like when people are going through a setback, they get stuck in shame or blame.
Yeah.
They're shaming themselves or they're blaming others. Like it's all their fault or it's all my fault. Guess what? It's neither. It's always a combination. It's always somewhere in the middle. It's never entirely someone else's fault. It's never entirely your fault. It's usually some combination.
So I know we've talked about the setback cycle, but I'm thinking it might be helpful for us to like run through one example, like start to finish of the different phases to kind of try to understand it more in motion.
Yeah.
So maybe the example I'll give that we haven't really talked about is, let's say you're dating someone. You're like, I finally met this great person. This is who I vision my life with. And then you have a huge fight and like the glass is shattered that they are not the perfect person you thought they were.
Ooh, the conflict setback.
How do you work through that from start to finish?
Well, this is an interesting example because I don't know that the first fight is necessarily a setback.
Okay.
I mean, I think that couples, when they fight, that is like a moment to see who the other person is. Because if you fight productively, that's great. And when I say productively, I mean like, can you come to each other with respect even when you are disagreeing? Can you come to each other without getting defensive and with acknowledging each other's perspective while respectfully disagreeing? So a first fight especially is an opportunity for actually relationship growth because couples will fight. If you are with someone who you agree with on every single point that you ever come across, like that would be super weird. You know, like humans don't agree on everything. You might have the same values, the same overarching vision of your lives, but you're going to disagree on some details of some stuff sometimes. If you have that first fight, that's a moment to see how that's going to go. How do you fight?
Yeah.
It's like, not to say it's a gift because it probably doesn't feel good in the moment, but I don't know that a first fight is a setback.
Okay. I guess like in that example though, like would the establish be that like, okay, I'm acknowledging that this relationship isn't perfect and that's okay?
Maybe. Depending on the circumstances, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
What about if the fight unveils something about your partner that goes against your values? For example, they throw something
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's obviously. Have you heard of the fashion designer Norma Kamali?
Yeah.
She invented hot pants. She invented the sleeping bag coat. She's like in her 70s, reinventing herself all the time. And she's had a 50 plus year fashion career. So when she started out, she started her business in like the 60s, 70s. She had her husband running the finances of her business. Now, he was an extrovert. He was going out all the time. She wanted to stay in, so she didn't always join him. That led to infidelity and spending of the company's finances on his social life, his extramarital affairs. So this is a business setback. This is like a pretty big dating relationship, marriage setback.
Yeah.
So Norma started to know about the infidelity and started to decide like, what should she do about it? Because again, she was so wrapped up. She was married to him. He was running the finances of the business. Like this wasn't like an easy walk away. One day she was in her store, and in the back of her store, there was her workroom. One of the women who Eddie was her husband, Eddie was cheating on her with, came to the back workroom and told Norma, I would like to design some clothes now as well. And Norma was so horrified by this. And they had some sort of conversation. And while they were having this conversation, the ceiling over Norma's workstation crashed down onto her table. Norma told me that there is always one moment that gives you the sign you need to move forward. And that ceiling, literally and figuratively, crashing down over, her marriage and her business was all she needed to finally walk away. It was like the last straw for her. So she left her marriage, she left the business behind, and with $98 to her name, she moved out, she got her own apartment, she had just like a mattress on the floor, she had nothing. But she started asking people she knew for help. Could I get a sewing machine? Could I borrow some fabric? She started designing clothes again. Little by little, she built her business back up. She started a new brand called OMO, On My Own. And that is the global fashion brand that Norma Kamali still runs today. And she has had, happy relationships since then. That's like a very overly simplistic version of the setback cycle, but like she fully emerged. She was like, not sure what to do. Like she knew about the infidelity. Like, what do I do? What do I do? How do I get out of this? And then one day she was like, I don't care. I'm out. I will figure it out. That was her explore. Right? She embraced it. And then she was just like, nope, I'm out. She relied on her community to help lift her out of her setback. And then she emerged as this global fashion icon who's boasted a 50-year career and defied the odds of like the entire industry. So yeah, she like emerged pretty well.
I love that story. I'm inspired. I'm pumped up. But I think when people think of emerge, they think that's what they're supposed to do. Like they think they're supposed to somehow rise out of the ashes and declare themselves a new person or find some meaning in life. Like they are now going to go save starving children in Africa. I don't know. Like they feel like it has to be something grand. Can you kind of walk us through what different kinds of emerge could look like?
Yeah. I mean, look, any setback is going to reveal something about yourself that you didn't know before. And that's all there is to emerge. It just shows you what you're capable of. Now, if you set your expectations unrealistically high, I have a whole section in the book called an expectations audit, and it shows us how to dissect where our expectations come from and decide whether we want to keep or reject them. Because sometimes the expectations that we hold are not our own. They came from our parents, from our culture, from society, from someone else. Sometimes we are just working so hard to please someone else that we realize our expectations are not our own. Or we're so busy rebelling against those expectations, but that is still responding to someone else's expectations and not setting your own. So yes, we love Norma's story because it just so perfectly illustrates the setback cycle, but it's a big dramatic version of one. You do not have to emerge in this major way. You just have to go discover what more possibilities might be available to you, what more you might be capable of now that this other path is gone. And it might be as simple as, now that I don't have to do this every Tuesday night, I'm going to spend that time, like that was our date night, I'm going to spend that time doing like a tap dancing class. And I always love tap dancing. It's my passion. That's how you spend your time. You meet someone there, you go out with her, she introduces you to her brother, you're married and have, 5 kids 3 years later. So I remember when I went through a breakup, my dad said to me, do something that you never would have done if you were still with him.
Yeah.
Go out and do something you never would have done.
I like that.
And it was great advice. And I don't remember what I did, but it was great advice. And I never forgot that advice. That's the explore phase. It doesn't mean go date a lot of people. It could mean go take a tap class. Go reconnect with that friend that you lost touch with because you were so busy focusing on this partner. You just never know where this new exploration might lead you. And don't set your expectations to the level of, I need to rise like a phoenix from the ashes and become a new person. You don't need to become a new person. You just need to learn more about who you are in this new evolution of yourself.
Yeah, I love that distinction because I think that's really important. Like, I'm thinking about your example that you shared, Amy, earlier about like the setback of thinking that your friend was in your corner and learning they weren't. What does an emerge look like from that?
I mean, I think just making peace with the fact that that relationship may have ended, but I actually feel like that person's going to come around one day. I just feel like that person's going to realize like, wow, that was like an extreme overreaction. And I'm sorry, just because I've been through this before. And this is usually how it ends. And if they don't, then that was never a real friendship. You know, if that person's not going to support you in this, like I'm probably better off without that person. Sad as that is to say, because I love this person and I wish they were still in my life. But if that's how it ends, that's how it ends. And here's the thing. I look back at every action I took and I don't regret anything. Good. I don't feel like I did anything wrong. That might be what, you know, makes me able to be at peace with that because I'm like, I wouldn't have changed anything. This is their decision to part ways. I did not make that decision. I might be around if they come around and the friendship might, you know, take a new form. Or if they come around, I might be just like, I don't really need this. So, and that's up to me if that happens in that moment. But my emerge from that situation, from that setback, is just making peace with the fact that that relationship is no longer what it was and being okay with it, which, you know, it stinks, but it is what it is. And obviously that person like just doesn't really deserve to be in my life. So
it can just be like that clarity to like move forward. It doesn't need to be the grand gesture again. Like if you like are dating someone and suddenly they're not ready to have a relationship, it can just be this recognition that I want someone that's fully in it with me and committed, and I'm going to emerge and, you know, be single or go find that person instead of like staying in a situationship.
Yeah.
So much of the emerge phase is just making peace and moving on from the setback.
Okay.
So for me, it's not like I like went and replaced my friend with a new friend. Like that's not exactly, but I definitely did.
I'm in the market for a new best friend.
You could.
I think it made me appreciate my other friends so much and the rest of my community so much because I'm like, well, I have a lot of people who are really incredibly supportive and here for me. And, you know, and everyone tells you this, like when you find success, people will sort of turn on you. And I like didn't really expect it to happen, but it happened. And I'm like, okay, that's not my person anymore. That's okay.
Why is it though that we dwell on the setbacks and not like, because I know I've been there too. It's like you have all these people that are positive in your corner, yet the focus is on the one person's not showing up. And I've done it too. Like, why do you think that's the case?
Because negativity is like Teflon. Negativity is like Teflon. It sticks to us so much more than the positivity. And again, like our brains are always learning more from the dopamine dip. And so we're reflecting on the negative experience more so because we're going to learn from it because we always want to avoid negative experiences because our brains are always chasing rewards. But when we get those rewards, we don't dwell on that. We just say, okay, move on.
Yeah.
Again, it's biology. It's human nature. We can be conscious of it and address it and acknowledge it. Even being aware of it in the way I just sort of described isn't going to prevent it from happening.
So maybe for anyone that's going through a setback right now, what are some words of encouragement you'd send them?
I would just say that, again, after listening to this podcast, after reading the book, you will have such a better understanding of the setbacks that you've endured over the course of your life. And if you really reflect on them, you'll see how resilient you were in that moment. Here's the thing. I want to give everyone the confidence that they will emerge from their next setback with a sense of resilience, of confidence, of clarity, of creativity, of innovation. The aftermath of a setback is when you come up with your best ideas.
Yeah.
So while it may not feel good right now, I promise you, you will emerge with such a vision of all you can achieve.
Well, thank you so much for just taking us through everything. I mean, there's so many takeaways from this conversation. I think first and foremost, just having a framework and a cycle, like that's so helpful because like I'm looking back to, earlier self and wish I just had something, even if you're not ready to embrace all of it, but just even establishing, saying like, hey, this is a setback. And I go through setbacks every day too. So it's something I can bring into current life too for things that are coming. And hopefully that can help you move through it faster. That being said, what I've also learned from this conversation is don't try to rush it because it can come back, or don't be afraid of the setback because that could also be inevitable because things compound on each other and bring things up for one another. I know like we started this off too, can setbacks be a good thing? I know you said actually the act of a setback isn't necessarily per se good, but I do like this. It can bring good things to you. And looking at like, in hindsight of what setbacks have brought, it has propelled us forward. So I think like if you can zoom out to the larger like life that you have, it can actually make sense why they're happening. But of course, that's not to diminish like the pain and challenge in the moment when you're going through it.
Of course, that's exactly it.
If there's one actionable takeaway that listeners can do today, I've learned this idea of intentionally spending your time addressing the setback and being intentional about your rumination. I love this idea of giving yourself a deadline. I remember just going through some of my dark days and I wake up and I'm like, today, maybe I'll address what I'm feeling, or maybe I'll feel great, or maybe I'll pursue a new hobby. It was like so many what ifs. And then by the end of that day, I didn't do anything. And then I then was disappointed in myself, which brought me deeper into my setback. So I think even just starting the day going, I'm going to give myself permission to do nothing today and just feel the feelings, that's already more productive than being like, I don't know how I'm going to spend my time today. That conscious dealing with the setback is so much better than what you already said in the beginning, Amy. It's just kind of freely dealing with the process and hoping that time will heal. Well, time could heal, but this could be a lot more efficient and more effective if we just consciously address it.
Yeah, more efficient is right. And manage your expectations.
Thank you so much. If people want to get a copy of your book, where can they find it?
It is at all major retailers, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, your local indie bookstore, bookshop.org, and you can go to thesetbackcycle.com if you want to learn more about the book or get in touch with me. I'm also on Instagram at Amy Shoe, at LinkedIn. Those are really the only two.
We'll link all of that in the show notes as well for people.
Cool. Thank you again. Thanks to our listeners. Did you learn something today? What did you learn about where you are in the setback cycle? Why don't you give us a rating and review in Apple Podcasts, 5 stars, and in the body of your review, you can tell us what you learned from Amy. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. Stay Dateable! The Dateable Podcast is part of the Frolic Media Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at Dateable Podcast and visit dateablepodcast.com for access to all the episodes and our premium programs. Also, make sure to subscribe today if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you are the first to get all the latest episodes. And most importantly, stay dateable.
Before you leave this episode, just a reminder to head over to dateablepodcast.com/programs if you want to get in on our Meeting People IRL Masterclass and see what else we have in store.
If you and your team want to cut down on busy work and get more choice and control over accounts payable, you need Bill. Bill Accounts Payable is your secret weapon for saving time on AP. And with a special offer at bill.com/podcast, you'll save money too. With Bill, streamline your entire AP process, including bill creation, approvals, and payments. You can pay with ACH, credit card, check, and international wire transfer. Plus, you can easily integrate with most accounting software. No wonder hundreds of thousands of businesses are already using Bill to manage their AP. Schedule a free demo now to see how Bill can automate your financial operations. And right now, get 15% off when you subscribe to Bill Accounts Payable. There's never been a better time to sign up. This special offer is available for a limited time only at bill.com/podcast. Terms apply. See bill.com/podcast for details.